was just kind of boring, to be quite honest.
It's time for the 13 Nights of Saraween.
Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to the 13 Nights of Saraween. Today we're going to be doing a reading vlog where we read the best horror of all time. In order to prepare for this video, I went ahead and I watched 28 fellow booktubers sharing their favorite horror books, and I tallied how many times each book was recommended. And so we're gonna go through what those top books were, and then for the vlog we're actually going to read the top 3. We had 3 books that had 7 people recommending them, and that was House of Leaves, which is I think a story about a man who lives in this crazy house, and the book is written in a really interesting format where the text is like all over the pages and it's like mixed media, and I think slowly this man starts to go crazy as he tries to uncover what is in this house. Then we had Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This was by far the most popular Stephen King book that got brought up. From what I know, Pet Sematary is about a family that moves into a new house, and near their house there is a cemetery for pets. And then the last book that got brought up 7 times was The Ruins by Scott Smith. This book is about a group of college students that go into some ruins, and I think they are either haunted or there's a monster in there. Something is going on. I know that this book involves a lot of body horror. And then lastly, the #1 book that got recommended the most is Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This was brought up 8 times. So from what I know, it's about a family that moves into a haunted house, and I've been told that the book and the TV show are very, very different. So I'm very interested to discover like what goes on in the book versus what is going on in the show. I actually never finished the Netflix series because it wasn't really my cup of tea, but maybe I'll like the book a little bit more than I saw the show. So as you can see, Haunting of Hill House is definitely going to be a book that I read for this vlog because it is the #1 book. But then we have 3 books in the category of books that were brought up 7 times, and so I'm going to choose what I want to read from this list. So right away I'm going to rule out House of Leaves because #1, House of Leaves is like 1,000 pages long, and everyone who has read it said that it's a very challenging read because the pages are so weird and the narrative is really weird, and there is no audiobook for this, and I really, really love listening to audiobooks, and so I am not going to make myself read House of Leaves. If you ever want to see a vlog where I read that, you can request that, but today is not going to be the day. So instead I'm going to be reading Pet Sematary and The Ruins. So those are the top 3 books that I'm going to read.
But I think this is just a book that truly stands the test of time and deserves all the praise it gets.
There's so much suspense and claustrophobia and intrigue and eeriness to this book that I just love it.
A haunted house story, but one where you never really know if the house is haunted or not, or if it's just the perception of the people in it. A really intriguing and disturbing and psychologically complex book. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay besties, I have finished The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and I gotta be upfront, I don't really know why everyone loves this. I will say Miss Shirley really ate because this book was written in the 50s. I just think for my 2023 brain it wasn't really living up to what I want it to be. It was just kind of boring, to be quite honest. Also, if you've watched the Netflix show, this is nothing like the Netflix show. It's very, very, very different, and I kind of feel like in a bad way. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of the show. The show was like kind of whatever to me. I was not really someone who got on that hype train, but I think the show is better than this. This is about a woman who answers a letter that she gets from this guy who claims to be, I believe he's like a college professor, and he is studying ghosts, and he's trying to prove that ghosts exist, and so he's going to stay in this place called Hill House for the summer, and he writes to her and asks if she will join him, and she says yes and just kind of gets in her car and goes, because this is like before the internet and before really anything. And so she goes, and then the house ends up being like really freaky deaky. Like, it's lopsided and it's like a maze inside, and everything about it is really crazy. And slowly but surely, as she's staying in this manor, a bunch of crazy stuff starts happening. What's interesting is that I thought there was gonna be more like studies going on, but a lot of it is just this main character like going crazy. I don't know if I agree with everyone saying this is the best horror of all time, but maybe I have no room to speak because I wouldn't call myself like a horror aficionado. Maybe if you really just like get the horror genre, this is just like a masterpiece to you. I didn't get it. Like, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, so this is the book that everybody loves? Like, this, what I'm reading right now, like this book right here is what everybody loves. Interesting. Okay, I wasn't loving. I didn't like it. I did not. I don't really have much more to say. I know this is kind of a short update. This book honestly is not that long. I thought it was boring. I don't know what else to tell you guys. And I didn't really love any of the characters. I think the main character is named Eleanor, and she was like fine. I don't know, like obviously like a lot of stuff is happening to her, and she's like specifically being targeted by like the ghosts in the house. And there's this other girl named Theodora who is very like snooty, like hoity-toity, comes from a rich family. I can't remember why the professor specifically chose them to come be his assistants. He had a reason why he wrote to each of them, but to be honest, even if Miss Shirley Jackson told me why, I don't remember. It wasn't for me, so I'm just gonna leave that to the rest of my booktube besties. But for me, I do not believe that that should be one of the top horror of all time.
I just love this book. There's something about it. I think it's the conversation about real life horror in this book. Like, there's something truly horrific that happens to this family.
This is a story about grief more than it is anything else, and King really used horror as a tool to explore grief.
And what he is able to get through in that story, that profound sense of loss and grief, and how we deal with that, and the lengths that we would go to in that grief, is just devastating.
Okay, besties, I have started Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and I'm not sure what I think about it so far. It's a little bit slow getting into it. I am enjoying the writing style, but I would say I'm about like 150 pages in, and not a whole lot has happened. We're following this family, and they just moved into this house, and the father in the family is a doctor. He is the main character. His name is Lewis. Lewis works at the local university, and on his first day on the job, he actually witnesses the death of a student. This guy was going for a jog, and then he got hit by a car, so he got brought into the infirmary, and he passed away in front of Lewis, and it was really scary. And so he's been really unsettled by that experience. And then on top of that, their house is right in front of this place called the Pet Sematary, and their neighbor across the street kind of told them the lore around this cemetery, and they went to go see it, and Lewis got weird feelings about this pet cemetery. I feel like a lot of this beginning part of the book is just learning about Lewis, learning about his family. They have 2 kids. They have a daughter and a son. What's interesting about this edition that I've been reading is that there's actually a foreword from Stephen King himself, and something that he says is, "When I'm asked, as I frequently am, what I consider to be the most frightening book I've ever written, the answer I give comes easily and with no hesitation. Pet Sematary. All I know is that Pet Sematary is the one I put away in a drawer, thinking that I had finally gone too far. Time suggests that I had not, at least in terms of what the public would accept, but certainly I had gone too far in terms of my own personal feelings. Put simply, I was horrified by what I had written and the conclusions I had drawn." I don't know, I just feel like that forward has really set my expectations really high. I'm expecting a lot from this, and so far, I'm just a little bored. We are really just following this family for a long time, like their day-to-day, what they're making their kids for lunch for school, when they're going to the park, when they're hanging out, when him and his wife like have sex. Like, we're really going through a lot together, but I'm kind of waiting for it to, you know, heat up. There hasn't really been a lot of grief happening, and I know a lot of people say that this book is about grief, and I really enjoy stories that explore grief. One of my favorite books that I've read this year is Our Wives Under the Sea, and that is definitely a story about grief told through the lens of horror, but it's definitely more about grief, and that's kind of the vibe that I've been getting when people talk about this book. And so I'm kind of waiting. I'm waiting for things to happen. Like, the stuff with the guy that died on the college campus was a little bit scary, because there's this part where Lewis ends up like sleepwalking and he wakes up in the pet cemetery, and that stuff definitely was creepy.
Well, you came in right when we were talking about Emily Henry, and then I had also been talking about Stephen King, because I read Pet Sematary recently. And I don't, you're like a horror queen, so I don't know your feelings about Stephen King, but I found that book to be a bit boring. Like,
oh, I haven't read Pet Sematary, but I feel like for me, the best Stephen King is coked up Stephen King. Like, the books he wrote when he was just like.
Okay, besties, I'm not gonna lie. I did finish Pet Sematary a long time ago, and I never filmed a vlog update. So here we are. It's not the best update. I'm very sorry to everyone who loves this book. All the people, all the booktubers that were singing its praises. I love that for you guys. Unfortunately, I don't really like this book. And honestly, nothing scary really happens. And I understand that what goes on in this book is really horrific in the sense of like real life tragedy. When it comes to like an actual horror book where I want to be like scared, like there's like a little bit of spookiness like towards the end, like when the stuff really gets going with the Pet Sematary. But I don't know, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like spoil you in case you want to read this. I didn't live, laugh, love. I did not live, laugh, love, and it took me like over 2 weeks to read this, which is always a bad sign. Is always a bad sign when I am reading a book. Like, if I can't finish this in a couple of sittings, then it's not my cup of tea. Honestly, take my opinion with a grain of salt, because what we're realizing in this vlog is that I don't know if horror is the genre for me, because I keep striking out on a lot of different horror books. I actually think I might do a video where I go through all of the horror books I've ever read and kind of audit them to see like what I actually like in horror, because I've been really struggling. Like there's quite a few horror books I've read since I finished this, and I gave a bunch of them like 2 or 3 stars, and so I'm just wondering if perhaps this isn't my genre. Also, the foreword from Mr. King was really misleading, because I really thought I was about to buckle in and get the scariest Stephen King book that I've ever experienced, and this is definitely just like you're following a family, and then the last, like, I wouldn't even say the last 25%, it's like the last 15%, all this crazy stuff happens, and you're like, okay, I'm so sorry to Mr. King and to all the booktubers, but she's not for me. She is not.
This book is incredibly well done. But if you want a very action-packed and very terrifying horror novel, I would recommend this.
The reason I love it so much is because this entire book is so visceral. It's so descriptive. You can feel their thirst, you can feel their hunger, you can feel their pain.
The way that Scott Smith builds on chaos and builds on making these people not only like vulgar, disgusting, and horrible people, but also at the same time interesting.
You know, I need to formally apologize to all the booktubers that I featured in this video, because here I am seeking out their favorite books, and then all I do is shit on them, because I have more bad news, guys. I read The Ruins, and I'm gonna be giving this 2 stars. I think I literally rated all 3 books 2 stars. I'm so sorry. I'm genuinely so sorry. If you're watching this because I tagged you, because I obviously wanted to give credit to you if I showed your face, I'm so sorry. Like, formally, please watch other content from me to know that I don't always hate everything. I mean, it happens quite a bit, but I try not to. The Ruins, what can I say about The Ruins? So the genre of book that this is white people going to a place where they shouldn't be and fucking around and finding out. So we're following a group of college students, and they're living it up in Mexico. They're about to enter the real world. I think they just graduated college. One of them's gonna be a teacher. They're all getting different jobs. Some of them are moving to Boston. Some of them are going to further schooling. Like, they're all just like relaxing before they go live their lives. While they've been on this vacation, they've also made some friends with some other people from other countries. They've been hanging out with this guy from Germany and also these people from Greece. And the guy from Germany basically one day is like, hey, my brother a couple of weeks back went off with some archaeologists to these ruins, and he hasn't come back yet, but he gave me instructions on how to find him. So I'm gonna go look for him. If you guys want to come with me, it could be like a little day trip, we can go do that. And they're all like, oh my god, that sounds so fun, like we'd love to do that, like we can go see some ruins, it'll be a good time. It's kind of sketchy and suspect as they're going to them. Like, the guy who they pay to drive them to the trail they need to go to, who doesn't speak English very well, is like, guys, you should really turn around, you should not keep going, like, please, I will drive you back, like, you should not go down that trail right there. And they're like, no, we gotta keep going, we need to go get his brother, like, whatever. And then they go into the woods, they're deep in the jungle, and they come across this group of indigenous Mayan people. They don't speak English either, and they're very unfriendly and unwelcoming, and basically at every turn are trying to get them to turn back. But this group of white kids is like, no, we need to keep going. So they go even further, and then they accidentally touch this vine, and after they touch the vine, the Mayans are like, no longer can you turn back, now you actually are forced to stay on this hill. And so the rest of the story is them being on this hill, and they don't have any water, they don't have any food, and it's like a survival story. But let me tell you something. I do this thing sometimes when I'm prepping for a video where I might go and watch 28 booktubers best horror of all time videos, but I'm not really listening to all the synopses of each book that they're talking about, or if I am, I'm forgetting by the time I'm reading the book. And so all these lovely people recommended The Ruins, and they very much told me that that was the plot of the book, but my brain made up my own plot. And so I had some very specific expectations going into this book. So my brain was like, oh my god, there's these college kids. They're really stupid and silly, and they want to go see some ruins. So they go to these ruins, and then they go into, like, you know, like dilapidated structures. Like, you know, obviously I'm picturing Mayan ruins, but then there's also like stone structures and stuff to go into. So they're going into the actual ruins. They're not just on a hill. And when they get there, it's like haunted, and there's like some sort of monster. Like, I'm thinking it's Mexico. I'm thinking it could be like a chupacabra. It could be something, you know, like some lore that like is unique to Mexico. I don't know. That's what I was picturing. Well, let me tell you what is actually going on this hill. And this is the part of the video where I'm going to say I am about to speak about spoilers for this book, because there's simply no way for me to speak about this without spoiling it, because I just need you guys to know how stupid I thought this was. When they get on this hill, the vine that they touched, right? Like, Miss Amy girl, that's one of the girls, Amy stepped on a vine and then the Mayans were like, you can't leave. And so soon we find out that the vine, like the literal vine, like the plant, is sentient and it is trying to eat people. The reason that the Mayans are like keeping them up on the hill is because the vine can spread and they don't want it to spread. So they're like, you touched it and you got contaminated, so you have to stay up there. And the whole book is an evil vine. And I'm just like, am I a botanist? Like, what is going on? I cannot take a plant seriously as the bad guy. I don't know, it's just like a survival story. And also, I don't really like survival stories. That's on me. That is on me for not listening when everybody was talking about what this book was about. And I made up my own plot and I really thought my plot sounded good. I feel like I might have been thinking about the movie The Descent, the one where they go down into the cave. So I feel like that's what I was envisioning for this. So all these people, they're just chilling on this hill and they're like going a little crazy because they like don't know what to do. And they start acting like really dramatic and crazy. Like at one point, a couple of them like get drunk. And I'm like, why would you get drunk if you're like dehydrated? Pablo, one of the Greeks, he falls into a hole because they hear like this chirping noise and they think it's a cell phone. And so they're like, oh my God, we gotta go down that hole. So the Greek guy volunteers to go down. And so they put him down into the hole and he falls and he ends up breaking his back. So then one of the college guys, Eric, is like, oh my God, I'll go down in the hole and try to get him. So Eric goes down into the hole, but then he falls too and he like scrapes his knee. The amount of time that Eric was down in that hole, I feel like it must have been like 20 pages. It felt so long. And I was listening to the audiobook for this on 3x speed. It is a horrible sign if an audiobook that I am listening to that fast feels slow. Like this book felt so slow and it's really not long. I truly felt like I was reading a 600-page book, and that's not the case. I think this is only like 300 and something pages. And so when Eric goes down in the hole to try to get Pablo, he's just like telling him stories, trying to make him feel calm because obviously he like broke his back and he's paralyzed. And then they rescue both of them out of the hole, and then that's when they are on the hill just like making horrible decisions, like getting drunk and doing all these things. At night, the vine actually gets inside Eric's body, like it goes inside his knee where he has an injury, and then it also eats the skin off of Pablo's legs. And I will say that is probably where the body horror starts to come in, but I don't know, I just felt very indifferent to it. I feel like when I'm reading, I don't get grossed out very easily. I just couldn't take this plant seriously. Like, am I supposed to be afraid of a vine? Because I'm not afraid of it. Like, obviously if I was living this in real life like myself and there was a random sentient plant, I would be very scared. But for a horror book, I wasn't live that loving. Also, Scott Smith spends so long introducing these characters. Like, we know their whole life stories by the time that they're all dying, and that's great if you want to care when they die. But the thing is, he made all of them really, really unlikable. Like, all of these people are horrible people, and so I just did not care. And they kept making stupid fucking decisions. I can't root for you. Honestly, the plant should eat you because you're idiots. I think Pablo's the only person I felt bad for because, number one, he didn't speak English, so even when he went down into the hole and stuff, they couldn't really like communicate with him. He has it the worst because they amputate his legs and then they barely take care of him. They just like leave him laying there for most of the time when they're like arguing with each other and whatnot. I very specifically like horror that moves a little faster, and that is actually something that all three of these books had in common. Pet Sematary, Haunting of Hill House, and The Ruins all had a very slow start, and they're all kind of like a slow descent into madness. I would honestly say they all have that in common now that I'm thinking about it. So I kind of get why all these people would recommend these, like if that's the kind of horror that you're looking for. I think I'm looking for something that's a little bit more like, you know, snappy. I want to really get into it and be scared. So it's very unfortunate. But I did not like this. I'm so sorry to everyone that I featured in this video, because you might get the notification in your YouTube creator studio and be like, wow, this random booktuber Sara I brought me up in her video. And then they're gonna like watch this video and they're gonna be like, okay, well, she's a bitch. But anyway, that brings me to the end of this video. Let me know down below if you can think of any horror books that I would like. I don't really know what I like, so you can just say anything and I'll try it. But so far this year, I'm learning that I don't like a lot of horror. I'm definitely gonna have to do that video where I audit every horror book that I've ever read to find out what I like, because I am perplexed. I'm confused and I want to be like the other girlies. I think this is one of those times where I keep trying this genre because I desperately want to fit in with everyone else, and I just can't. I can't do it. I definitely would recommend trusting the people who recommended these books, because I feel like they're all people who read horror a lot more often than I do. So their opinion probably is worth more. I feel like I'm just a picky bitch and I didn't enjoy any of them. So anyway, I hope that you still enjoyed watching this vlog, even though I didn't really have a great time with the books that I read. If you've made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, feel free to use the jack-o'-lantern emoji. I was just thinking of that because I'm wearing these little earrings with cats and pumpkins on them. I think this one keeps like flipping around. But anyway, I got these earrings when I was in the UK and I'm obsessed with them. Also, feel free to check out my Patreon if you're interested in extra content. All of my patrons were very much aware when I was reading all of these books because I kept talking about them on reading sprints. And so if you want that kind of like behind the scenes sneak peek, then be sure to check that out. And I thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.